The alarm sounded at 3:47 in the morning. Not a phone, not a clock, a global telescope network, RAND. The kind that only triggers when something the system has no prior record of appears in a monitored field. And the thing it detected was moving. Fast. Inbound. From a direction in interstellar space where there are no known origin points within a reasonable distance. That was August 28, 2025. By midday, 4 independent observatories had confirmed the detection. By the following evening, orbital analysts had run the preliminary trajectory, and within 48 hours the world had a designation, 3I-ATLAS, the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected passing through our solar system, moving at 34 kilometers per second, not bound to our sun, not from here. The official statement called it a comet, an icy interstellar wanderer, drifting for millions of years before its path happened to carry it through our corner of the galaxy. Natural, unremarkable, nothing to recalibrate your understanding of the universe over. That was the statement. Here is what the data actually showed, because in the weeks that followed that initial detection and as more telescopes trained on the object, as more observations accumulated, as researchers began comparing notes across institutions, 5 specific anomalies emerged, 5 distinct behaviors, 5 measurable signatures, 5 characteristics that natural objects simply do not produce. And when you stop analyzing them in isolation and start looking at them as a system, as a coherent set of data points pointing in the same direction, the conclusion that begins to surface is one that mainstream science is not yet willing to state publicly. 3I-ATLAS may not be a comet. It may not be a rock. It may be something that was built, and on March 16, 2026, when it makes its closest approach to Jupiter, we may get the evidence that decides this question for good. If you have not subscribed yet, do it before you finish this video, because when the Jupiter data comes in, you need to be in the room. Now, let's get into the anomalies. Anomaly 1, the architecture of the jets. To understand why this matters, you first need to understand how comets behave when they vent. A comet is, at its core, a dirty snowball, a nucleus of ice, dust, rock and frozen volatiles. When it approaches the sun and heats up, the ice sublimates. It goes directly from solid to gas, and that gas carries dust with it, punching outward from the surface in jets. Those jets are driven by whatever pockets of volatile material happen to be closest to the surface. And because cometary nuclei are irregular, asymmetric and tumbling, the venting is chaotic, unpredictable. When you photograph a comet's emission structure, what you get looks like a body losing its composure and yet gas pouring off in multiple directions, plumes twisting as the nucleus rotates. No clean geometry, no repeating pattern. This is how all known comets behave. Every single one. 3I-ATLAS produced 3 jets, not a dozen, not a chaotic cloud. 3. Distinct, stable. And when imaging teams measure the angular separation between those jets across 17 separate observation sessions conducted over 11 consecutive days, the result was always the same, 120 degrees. Each pair of jets separated by exactly 1/3 of a full rotation around the nucleus, a perfect trisect, consistent across every imaging window, not drifting, not fluctuating, not evolving the way a natural venting pattern would evolve as a nucleus rotates and its surface changes. Locked in place. To produce that pattern naturally, you would need a nucleus whose volatile pockets are distributed at mathematically equal intervals around the body, with a rotational axis and rate that exposes each pocket to solar heating for identical durations across a surface that does not change its composition or orientation over 11 days of observations. The physicists who modeled this were not subtle in their assessment. The probability of that specific configuration arising by chance in an interstellar body, one that has been tumbling through space for a vast period of time, sits somewhere in the range of 1 in several 100,000, and some models put it considerably lower. One team described the geometry as physically implausible under random origin. There is a far simpler explanation. If those 3 points are not geological accidents but designed apertures and fixed, engineered emission ports then the geometry is not a mystery. It is a specification, a precision structure doing exactly what it was built to do, with exactly the regularity you would expect from something manufactured rather than formed. The first anomaly is not subtle. It is written in the geometry itself, and there is a detail that makes this even harder to dismiss. The jets did not emerge immediately upon the object's approach to the Sun. In the earliest observations during the inbound phase when 3I-ATLAS was still beyond the orbit of Mars, The emission was diffuse, unstructured, what you would expect from outgassing across an irregular surface warming unevenly. But as the object drew closer, something changed. The diffuse emission organized itself over a period of roughly 2 weeks, as catalogued across a sequence of telescopic observations. The chaotic initial venting resolved into those 3 locked equidistant apertures. That transition, Andrew, from unstructured emission to precision geometry, Andrew, is not something comets do. Comets do not become more organized as they heat up. Heat adds energy to a chaotic system, and chaotic systems do not spontaneously develop angular precision, but a machine with dormant venting ports that activate in sequence as internal temperatures rise to operational thresholds. That would look exactly like what the telescopes recorded, a gradual activation sequence, a system coming online, Anomaly 2. The surface that should not look the way it looks. When astronomers backtracked 3I Atlas's trajectory, RAC computed the inbound path using its observed position and velocity. RAC, the origin vector, pointed toward a source region more than 60 light-years away. Not a specific star, no clear home system, just a direction and a distance. And at the object's measured velocity, the transit time from that distance would have been approximately 2 million years. 2 million years in interstellar space. Now consider what that means for a natural object. 2 million years of continuous exposure to cosmic ray bombardment. 2 million years of ultraviolet radiation from every star in a 360-degree sky. 2 million years of low-velocity microimpacts from interstellar dust grains, each one slowly grinding and altering the surface material. The outer layer of an object that old, exposed that long, would be chemically transformed random in complex organics, converted into complex organics, darkened, refractory. The spectral profile of a 2 million-year-old interstellar traveler is well understood. Astronomers have modeled it. We know what it should look like. 3I-ATL does not look like that. Spectroscopic analysis of the surface material returned readings inconsistent with 2 million years of exposure. The surface is not as radiation processed as the trajectory demands. The chemistry skews younger and significantly younger. Some regions of the spectrum look so unexpectedly unweathered that the first team to analyze the data suspected a calibration error, rechecked their instrumentation from the ground up, and confirmed the result. The readings were not a mistake. The surface simply does not match the history the trajectory implies. You are now looking at a contradiction that has no clean natural resolution. The trajectory says this object has been in transit for 2 million years. The spectrum says the surface has not experienced 2 million years. Either the trajectory is wrong, which means the object changed course at some point, which is not something natural objects do on their own, or the surface has been renewed, refreshed, protected from the degradation that should have accumulated over that extraordinary span of time. Both options point toward the same word, a word that natural science does not usually need: maintenance. There is an important distinction to draw here. This is not a minor spectral discrepancy of the kind that sometimes emerges from measurement uncertainty or instrument calibration offsets. The gap between the expected radiation damage profile and the observed surface chemistry is significant enough that multiple research groups, working independently, flagged it as anomalous before they knew others had reached the same conclusion. When they eventually compared notes, the consistency of the finding was itself treated as confirmation. The surface of 3I Atlas looks like something that has been protected, shielded, kept in a condition suitable for a purpose it was still supposed to serve when it arrived. Anomaly 3, the acceleration without a source. This one arrived in the data quietly, buried in the orbital mechanics, and it took several weeks of cross-checking before anyone was willing to say it out loud at a conference. 3I Atlas is accelerating on its outbound leg, not slowing down, not coasting, speeding up as it moves away from the inner solar system, increasing its distance from the sun with every hour. It is gaining velocity beyond what the known physics of the situation can produce. The two forces capable of pushing a small solar system body are solar radiation pressure and the reaction force of cometary outgassing. Both diminish as the object moves further from the sun and cools. Both are decreasing, and yet the object is accelerating faster than the sum of both would allow. The excess is not large in absolute terms, fractions of a millimeter per second squared, but it is consistent in a way that natural forces never are. Cometary outgassing acceleration is bursty, tied to the heating and cooling of the rotating nucleus, correlated with changes in insulation, erratic in its variations. What 3I Atlas is showing is none of that. The excess acceleration is smooth, steady, maintained without fluctuation across weeks of observation, the signature of a controlled output, not a chaotic natural process. In 2017, Oumuamua showed comparable behavior, RAND excess non-gravitational acceleration with no convincing source. That mystery cracked open a debate that split the astronomical community and was never fully resolved. One proposed explanation involved outgassing of hydrogen gas, so light that the detectors of that era would have missed it. Physically permitted, untestable with 2017 instruments, accepted by some as plausible and by others as a convenient escape hatch. We are not working with 2017 instruments. The arrays monitoring 3 IAATLAs are a full generation more sensitive. If hydrogen outgassing were occurring at a magnitude sufficient to reduce this acceleration, multiple teams have confirmed it would be detectable at our current threshold. Researchers looked for it specifically. It is not there. No outgassing signature of any kind has been found at a magnitude consistent with the acceleration being observed. Whatever is producing the thrust is invisible to every detection method we have applied. It is not emitting. It is not venting. It is simply quietly pushing. And it has been doing so consistently since the moment anyone started measuring carefully enough to notice. Let me put a number on this to make it concrete. The excess acceleration is approximately 4.7 meters per second squared. That is small. To give you a sense of scale, it is roughly equivalent to the acceleration you would feel lying flat on a mattress at an almost imperceptible force, but in a vacuum of space, sustained over time, even a tiny consistent force produces a measurable velocity change. Over the months since first detection, that accumulated delta V has put 3I ATL noticeably ahead of where ballistic trajectory calculations RAND, assuming no additional force ran radius, said it should be. It is not where a natural object coasting on inertia would be. It is ahead of that position. Consistently. Reproducibly. As if something has been applying a steady, low-level correction for the entire outbound journey. The engineers who design ion drives for deep space probes will recognize that profile immediately. Consistent low-thrust acceleration sustained over long periods is exactly the operational signature of an efficient propulsion system, optimized for long-duration autonomous flight. Not a rocket burn, not an outgassing surge, a patient, continuous push from a system designed to operate for a very long time without intervention. Anomaly 4, the frequency.
On a night in late October 2025, a radio telescope array in New Mexico picked up something it was not looking for. The facility was running a standard sky survey when 3I ATLAS passed through the observing field. The researchers were not targeting the object. Appeared in their data during post-processing analysis. And alongside the positional record, there was a radio emission. Narrowband. Stable. Lasting 11 minutes. At 13 megahertz. If you have spent any time reading about SETI, or you have spent any time reading about SETI, 1400 megahertz is the natural emission frequency of neutral hydrogen, the most abundant element in the observable universe. Every civilization that develops radio astronomy will discover this frequency in their first generation of instruments. It is inescapable physics, and because any space-capable civilization will have found it, it has long been theorized as the default broadcast band, MERI, the channel you transmit on if you want the greatest possible chance of being received by someone you have never met, because you can be certain they already know to listen there. SETI researchers identified it as the primary candidate frequency in the 1950s. Decades passed. The channel stayed quiet. Nothing came through. And then, 3I ATLAS crossed through a radio telescope's field of view and broadcast on it. The emission was not a tone. It was not noise. It had internal structure. The pattern of variations that repeated with modifications, the distinguishing characteristic that separates an engineered signal from electromagnetic interference. The team who found it filed a quiet report with the International Astronomical Union and waited. 3 other facilities subsequently confirmed the detection from independent recordings. Same frequency, same internal structure, same 11-minute window. 4 separate instruments, 4 separate locations, 4 independent datasets. The natural explanation involves a very particular chain of conditions. The interaction between the object's magnetic properties and the surrounding solar wind plasma producing, by chance, narrowband emission at exactly the frequency that the entire history of SETI research identified as the universal channel with internal repeating structure during a single 11-minute window, captured by 4 separate facilities. Not one documented case of a natural small body or Hench-Holect comet asteroid interstellar object has ever produced anything resembling this. Not in decades of systematic observation across thousands of objects. 4 confirmations, 11 minutes, the one frequency every listening civilization already had tuned in. Now let me tell you the detail that keeps the researchers who know about this from sleeping soundly. The internal structure of the 11-minute emission was analyzed by 3 separate signal processing teams. All 3 teams found the same thing. The signal contains what appears to be a base pattern that repeats, and layered on top of that repeating base are variations. Deviations from the pattern that are not random. They are not random because the deviations themselves repeat with a different periodicity, a rhythm within a rhythm. Nested structure. The mathematical signature of that kind of layered encoding is not something electromagnetic interference produces. Interference is noise with statistical properties. What was recorded has statistical properties that belong to intentional encoding, a signal designed to be received, not a phenomenon generated by mindless physics. None of the 3 teams are claiming they have decoded it. They are not saying they understand what information it contains, or even that it contains what we would recognize as information in our sense of the word. What they are saying carefully, quietly, in language that hedges at every turn because careers are at stake, is that the mathematical profile of the emission is inconsistent with natural origin. That is the phrase being used in the internal communications that have been shared among the researchers involved. Inconsistent with natural origin. 11 minutes of signal that the instruments of 4 separate facilities agree was not produced by physics alone. Anomaly 5, the Jupiter geometry. This is the anomaly that changes the framing of everything that came before it. As 3I at Teles continues its outbound path, the trajectory does not simply point away from the sun in a random direction. It converges with mathematical precision on a specific point in space at a specific date. On March 16, 2026, 3IATL will execute a flyby of Jupiter at a closest approach distance of approximately 1 million kilometers. The orbital mechanics are well established. This is not an estimate. The date is fixed. Now let's examine what that trajectory actually represents. The geometry of a gravitational flyby is not trivial. The angle of approach, the closest approach distance, and the relative velocity together determine how much kinetic energy the passing body extracts from the planet's gravity well, and what heading it carries afterward. For a spacecraft, deliberately using a planetary flyby as a propulsion technique, a maneuver that has been standard in space mission design since the Voyager probe's Mertens, engineers spend months optimizing these parameters. The goal is maximum energy gain combined with the correct outbound vector to reach the next destination. The approach geometry of 3I/Atlas at Jupiter is optimal, not approximately, not coincidentally close. The angle, the distance, the velocity aren't hitas, they fit the profile of a calculated slingshot, the kind of trajectory a mission planner designs on purpose, not the kind that emerges from an object, coasting on uncontrolled inertia through a solar system it arrived in by chance. And the outbound heading after Jupiter adds its gravitational energy, ANRAC, the direction 3I Atlas will be pointed as it exits our solar system at increased velocity ANRAC, is roughly consistent with the region of space from which its inbound trajectory originated. The same direction, a return heading. It arrived. It passed through the inner solar system. It broadcasts on a universal frequency. And now it is using the largest planet in the solar system as a fuel stop before heading back toward wherever it came from. But here is the detail that takes Anomaly 5 from striking to almost unbearable to sit with. The trajectory that sets up this optimal Jupiter slingshot grants the inbound path that positioned 3I Atlas to arrive at Jupiter's location on March 16, 2026, at the exact angle and velocity required. Arnurin meets was established before the object crossed the heliopause, before it entered our solar system. It was on this heading when it was still in interstellar space, years before anyone on Earth knew it existed. The geometry was not set up during the approach. It was designed into the mission before the mission began. Whatever aimed this object aimed, it knowing where Jupiter would be on March 16, 2026. That requires an understanding of our solar system's architecture, the orbital period of Jupiter, the position of the Sun, the gravitational geometry of a system. This object was approaching from 60 light-years away, and it requires that whoever Angel or whatever Angel set this trajectory had been watching us long enough to know these things in detail, long enough to plan an optimized departure using a gas giant whose position they calculated before they launched their probe. Natural objects do not select flyby geometries. They do not arrive with inbound vectors that set up optimized gravitational assists 60 light-years and 2 million years later. They go where physics sends them, without calculation, but something executing a mission, something that entered the system with an objective, conducted its survey, and is now in the departure phase, would use Jupiter exactly this way. It knew where Jupiter would be. It has been steering toward this date since it crossed our heliopause. 5 anomalies. Sit with them together. This is the moment where I want to address something directly. When you present evidence like this, RDF, especially evidence that points toward an extraordinary conclusion, RDF, the instinct of a careful mind is to look for the escape route, to find the individual explanations that let each anomaly stay in the domain of the mundane. And I want to be honest with you, those escape routes exist, technically, for each individual anomaly. The jets could be a strange geological coincidence. The young surface could be a spectral artifact. The acceleration could be hydrogen we have not detected. The signal could be an unprecedented electromagnetic interaction. The trajectory could be a remarkable coincidence of initial conditions from some origin we have not identified. You can always dismantle evidence, one piece at a time. But here is the standard that science actually applies when it is being intellectually honest about cumulative evidence. The more independent anomalies you need to explain away simultaneously, each requiring its own improbable special pleading, the less credible the natural explanation framework becomes as a whole. 5 anomalies, each requiring a low probability natural explanation, each independent of the others, all present in the same object at the same time, birds. The combined probability of the natural explanation for all 5 together is not the sum of the individual probabilities. It is the product. And that product is a very small number. The Sentinel hypothesis is not special pleading. It is the single coherent explanation that accounts for all 5 anomalies simultaneously without requiring any of them to be an improbable exception. Structured emission jets locked at 120-degree intervals on it. The signature of engineered apertures, not random geology. A surface too fresh for its journey, maintained across 2 million years of interstellar transit as if someone needed it functional on arrival. A steady, invisible acceleration on thrust, with no detectable propellant, smooth and consistent in a way that no natural force produces. A narrowband radio emission at the universal frequency, 1 arouse, 11 minutes, 4 confirmations, internal structure, 1 arrest, from a body that has never spoken before and may never speak again, and a Jupiter flyby geometry optimized with the precision of a calculated mission plan on a heading that leads back toward the origin. Individually, each anomaly is uncomfortable. Collectively, they are pointing at something, every one of them, in the same direction. The Sentinel hypothesis proposes that 3I Atlas is an autonomous probe, not crewed, not carrying beings looking out of viewports. Automated. A machine launched by a civilization, RAC, perhaps millions of years ago, RAC, executing a program with no one aboard to supervise it. Its mission may be survey, documentation, the systematic observation of solar systems in a defined region of the galaxy, filing logs and broadcasting status pings and using gravitational assists to navigate with extraordinary efficiency. A spacecraft doing its job, indifferent to whether the civilization that built it still exists, because the program runs regardless. Under that hypothesis, none of the 5 anomalies are mysteries. They are features, design specifications. The object is working exactly as built. 67 days. That is the distance between January 9th, 2026 and March 16th. If 3I Atlas is a natural object, R comet, an icy wanderer, a rock with a strange statistical profile, RJAR, then March 16th is the day it swings past Jupiter and disappears into the outer solar system. The anomalies will eventually find explanations. The data will be published, papers will be written, science will move forward, satisfied. But if it is not natural, if there is an active system aboard, still running its mission, executing the final phase of a program sequence, then March 16th may produce something observable, a behavioral change at the Jupiter waypoint, an updated transmission, a course correction, more precise than passive gravity alone can produce, something that only a machine responding to a navigational trigger would generate. We have instruments aligned on it, arrays calibrated. The most sensitive radio receivers on Earth are set to that frequency. The imaging telescopes are scheduled. Every data pipeline we can access will be open on that date. We have been transmitting into space for over a century. We sent golden records. We beamed mathematical pulses at target stars. We pointed every receiver we had outward into the silence and listened for something to answer. We assumed that contact, if it ever came, would arrive from the outside, from somewhere distant, from a civilization we had to reach toward. 3i Attulas came inbound, in the middle of the night, broadcasting on the frequency we designated for exactly this scenario, using our largest planet as a fuel stop, leaving on a heading that points back toward wherever it started. Maybe that is all coincidence. Maybe the numbers eventually resolve into something unremarkable and this moment becomes a footnote. Or maybe something crossed the interstellar dark to look at us, and we are 67 days from finding out. Subscribe. Be here on March 16th. This investigation is not finished. It has barely begun.